Welcome to Home Smith's Educational Resources. I'm Allison Smith and this is William. And each month we use our 20-year homeschooling experience to help you narrow choices, build confidence, and your support community. So sit back and we're going to relax. We're going to talk about some good topics this month. All right, so this month we're focusing on who in the part of homeschooling, right? And that corresponds to the second chapter in my book about starting to homeschool. And so in this video, we hope to encourage you to think bigger than a traditional teacher in who is going to homeschool your kids and who is homeschooling right now. And I want you to see, or we both want you to see, that you don't have to homeschool alone, and you also don't have to learn calculus in order to homeschool your kids.
And as we prepared for this episode and we're looking to see who it is and what it is now, we had our own possible misconceptions about who is homeschooling and the history of homeschooling with the blog post that you had.
That's what I did a blog post a few weeks ago, and you may have seen it. I'll put the link on the description down bottom. But I was actually surprised. So we were kind of the second generation of homeschoolers, not the first generation. The first was in the 70s, and then early 80s when homeschooling became legal in most states in the United States, and it was the early 90s before homeschooling was legal in every state. Did you know that?
I did not.
But it came out of a movement from the 60s that was anti-establishment and anti-government. And our generation of homeschoolers was more of that Christian values homeschooler, and that's what we saw most when we talked about the 15 passenger van and the lots of people with jean skirts and lots of kids. So I was really surprised to learn that the original modern homeschool movement came from more of an anti-establishment or a rejection of the system, which to me sounds really familiar, right?
Well, definitely with what some families that we have come in contact with here recently, they're looking for an alternative to the public school system.
Right.
And so, yeah, definitely some similarities. But of course, I always make it about me. So I thought, everybody just did it basically for that lens of we wanted to provide a biblical worldview. That was where we were. But then, and like you said, when you did some investigation and we've talked about it, I guess nothing new is under the sun. We kind of come back full circle again.
Right. So like we're kind of in the third generation of modern homeschoolers, and we've gone back to a lot of the original motivation. And what we see is more of a rejection of the system than we were public school graduates. So we didn't really see that much difference, except we were more focused on the what than we were on the how. And that's what I see a lot of people are looking at now, is alternative ways to educate their kids past a schoolroom.
Right.
So, and I mean, I've met with someone just this morning with two parents who are working. And so, I mean, we're seeing all of that where even in the past we used to see where you just had one homeschool parent and one working parent. Very rarely saw two. I mean, we saw some of it, or working part-time or something like that, but we're seeing all sorts of homeschoolers, grandparents coming in now with that multi-generational thing. We've talked about that before. And also the reasons are just varied beyond just the religious, spiritual aspect of it. I mean, it's social, mental, physical, all types of reasons.
Well, that kind of going back, I know we talked about it briefly, but coming out of the homeschool conference that we went to, you walk into that curriculum hall and you see a lot of the answers. So obviously the marketplace is providing solutions for those myriad of different reasons, things that I can't say I necessarily comprehended, but with automation, with technology, and incorporating so much of that together. But then that adds another layer to it of where do we go for authority? Where do we go for help? Who
Right.
is it that I can trust to help us navigate this process?
That's one of our biggest convictions, is that you don't have a limited amount of information. You have an infinite amount of information. I know all of the questions because I've Googled them myself. I've Googled, how do you homeschool? Who homeschools? How are you successful at homeschooling? And you get thousands and thousands and thousands of answers. And that really is confusing. It does not help you um, narrow your choices. And so that's what we're hoping to do through these videos, through the other resources that we have, are help you gain confidence and to use that confidence to narrow your choices, because there's so many choices out there right now.
But what are some of those sources that are foundational
Mm-hmm.
for the best? Where as we reflect back and we're
Mm-hmm.
utilizing what it is that we did and what we experienced, as we look back, where are those sources?
The first source that we had to gain courage to choose to homeschool is that we surrounded ourselves with some families that were like-minded. We
Yes.
didn't homeschool the same way. We also didn't have the same academic background. Some of us had college degrees. Some of us thought we were going to homeschool long term. Some of us didn't know.
Some of them strictly vocational.
Yeah, right. Some of us knew they weren't going to college, but the overarching aspect, as we talked about before, was that we had the spiritual component, that we're trying to raise up our kids with a biblical worldview.
Absolutely.
And then the next one I would say is our support groups with in person
Yeah,
relationships.
I was going to say, make sure that as we reflect back,
Mhm.
underneath that was an important component, was we interacted. We are not only just us as parents, but the children,
Yeah, right.
and they still maintain those relationships to this day as they are starting their own families.
Well, and then those in person relationships, we know each other better. So as we're getting older and we see different families making different choices, we can have the conversations, like ask them, why, what does this do? Why are you making this change? Or sometimes, and this is kind of how we started doing this, is that families came to us asking us, things aren't working, or can you help me do this? And because I knew them well, I knew what their goals were. I knew how they like to structure their homeschool. Then I could give them better advice because I knew them personally.
Absolutely, had a reservoir
Hmm.
there to be able to build upon, as opposed to just a brief interaction you
Right,
had.
that
That's it.
just way out there question, like what should I pick for third grade curriculum? Because there's so many out there. How would I know how to answer that question?
And then, kind of the next one that we were going to talk about a little bit here is, as we truly go back to when we were going through this,
Mhm.
if you haven't been through high school, how do you have that? And
Right.
and so how do you quantify that?
The person, I can remember back one specific person who had already graduated. I think she, at that point, she'd graduated two high schoolers, and I went to her and talked with her. We met over lunch one day, and she just gave me some great advice and these like little tips from people who have already gone through the process before, not people who were like Googling and starting the process. So she had already graduated too, and she told me, hey, don't think about high school in terms of 4 years, think about it in terms of 5 years. If your kids are ready to start high school level math in eighth grade, let them start high school level math on eighth grade, and think of it in terms of 5 years instead of four. Or if your kids aren't ready to start something, go an extra year and don't be more flexible about it. She gave me courage through high school to not think about that I was going to ruin my kids' prospect for college or for getting a job or succeeding in being a family person or whatever by that extra year.
Well, then that ultimately freed us up for to take dual enrollment, to
Mm-hmm.
provide
Right.
remediation if it was
Yes.
necessary, to be able to master something that was really a struggle, but to have that confidence then to be able to go back and have the time
Right.
where it's not hurry up and wait, or I need to sit by this complete structure.
Right. I mean, one example of the kind of behind thing is that we got to more advanced math, and we had our daughter had some skill gaps that I didn't really realize, And so she had a really hard time with some advanced math. And we basically just stopped it in the middle of the year and started back over. And if I had not gotten that advice to approach high school from a 5 year aspect instead of a 4 year, we probably would have just gone on and she wouldn't have mastered it. Now she went to college and, aced all of her math because we were able to have the time to go back. So that those great people that have kind of been there, done that, have already been through the phase that I'm in, that are kind of my mentors, have really been impactful for me.
And kind of where ultimately our heart is at this point in our life
Right.
is definitely technologies and opportunities continue to evolve and change, but still at the end of the day, where do I go to be able to find out what is legal in the state of Georgia? Something that's
Yes.
just basic and
Or
foundational.
anywhere, right?
Right.
Any part of the country, right?
Right.
I mean, it's having that background to know where we can trust information. I find the people that know you best, or the relationships that are more mentor type relationships, are really helpful.
Absolutely.
So changing subjects just a little bit, we talked about that homeschooling is more diverse than ever. Is People are doing it for different reasons, but next, I think we wanted to talk about who should consider homeschooling.
Has the umbrella ever been more open to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Things that we kind of took for granted because we had not had exposure to it, but was for a social issue
Mm-hmm.
or a physical issue.
Right.
I mean, I joke about our middle son and his attention span and how you modified the classroom to be able to allow him to be successful. But there are other things that come into play.
Right. I mean, we have um, lots of mental things, physical things that our kids are facing out in the world, younger and younger. And what a great opportunity to, not even just from um, a worldview aspect, but also for a physical aspect, to be able to be around your kids. So people who are kids who are having more of those social pressures, I think is a new way, a new group of people who are homeschooling. It wasn't something that is big now, and to be able to come alongside of our kids when they're feeling nervous about something, when they're fearing failure, when they have a physical or are afraid of things, even when they're younger, to help them work through those things as a parent, and to understand that they can trust you as a parent because you're spending time with them. That's one of the outside non-academic benefits of homeschooling.
Yeah, and then ultimately prepares them for adulthood
Mm-hmm.
because it's not a question if we are going to, as adults, face a challenge or an opportunity or how do I do something, but then it becomes you go back to that foundation, that discipline of okay, when I face this, I have prepared myself to be able to explore, to be able to gain the knowledge, to be able to apply, to be able to overcome.
Right.
Um, and then also the flexibility is something that cannot be neglected
Right.
as we reflect back on how much we enjoyed and how much we got to do extracurricular. Not that learning wasn't taking place once again, but it was all the time,
Right.
everywhere that we were.
We forget, or I sometimes forget the aspect of flexibility in homeschooling, in our schedule. And I think a lot of parents probably saw that during COVID,
Yes.
that homeschooling doesn't take as much time, so we can live life. We can live life with our whole family, and there's some bonding, some unity aspects of just spending more time. And you're big on teachable lessons. There's more opportunity for that. As you go for a walk in the park and you see different people, you interact with different people, and you can pick up and say, "Oh my goodness, it's a beautiful spring day, and I'm not going to start at 8 o'clock today. We're going to go to the park and we're going to enjoy the weather, and then come back, and then school during the middle of the day, finish our lessons during the middle of the day." And the flexibility of that, I think, is good for our mental health. It's good for our understanding of how learning happens and develops lifelong learners too.
Absolutely. Well, and kind of come alongside that, the creativity where you are able to learn as you are going through life. At this point, you and I are still learning, whether it's going
Yeah.
to a homeschooling conference or it was preparing the garden yesterday that we hope to complete, later today. It's ongoing, and the love, the bonds that are created there, and how that opens up doors once again as they move from your home to creating their own home. That confidence that you
Right.
address
I
there
was
is
constantly thinking of how can I teach this better, more efficiently, and outside the classroom. How can I teach the same lesson in a real life, in a way that is more tangible to my kids, that makes them explore, makes them say, "Oh, that's amazing." So a family that wants more creativity in how school and how learning happens, and approaching learning as a holistic thing as
right.
opposed to a specific subject at a certain time of day. I think it's somebody who's encouraged and interested in that would do really well with homeschooling.
It's been one of the best things as far as having adult children at this
Mm-hmm.
point is seeing them as they're developing their careers. They are not taken off course when something goes wrong. They understand, they have been prepared. Maybe they don't know the answer on how to be able to solve it, but how to systematically go through it, whether it's an interpersonal relationship with a coworker or it's machinery that is down and what in the world do I do?
Right.
It,
Yeah.
and being able to process that. But once again, that creativity aspect, the other side of it is when you are at the park and it's the middle of the day and the typical family is at work and at school, and then you have that opportunity to come in contact with somebody that maybe doesn't understand or their world has not
The,
had it.
you're
And
you're talking about negative Nancy's, right? With
yeah,
homeschooling.
absolutely. And how do you be able to balance that part?
Well, I mean, to me, I have to put them in categories. So we have the negative Nancy's that are just generally against homeschoolers. We have the negative Nancy's that are kind of unsure, and then we have kind of the ignorant ones that
Right.
just don't know anything. And I think you treat them different, because you will have naysayers in your homeschool journey. We still have them after our homeschool journey, even though we've produced well adjusted and participating members in society. People still ask us questions that are skeptical of homeschooling. They're still unsure of it, even though we have evidences with our kids.
Well, I mean, I think that one's pretty simple. We don't. It's not our job to change their mind.
Yeah.
I mean, we can approach that graciously and be like, we were being obedient. We're doing the best that we know how with the time, the energy, the resources that it is that we have.
Because we love our kids, we care
Right.
about our kids, and that's something that I think I'm always convicted of. I want to never convey or to try to talk someone into homeschooling. If you're here because you're interested in homeschooling, our hope for you is that we hope we can show you that you can homeschool. Um, but if you're not called to homeschool, those people shouldn't homeschool, and I shouldn't. I can't change your mind.
Right.
It's not my conviction to change your mind. And then also, I think we had. I think I've written about this, that 3 out of the 4 grandparents when we started were kind of skeptics, and I don't say that they were negative about it necessarily, but they weren't sure about how we could prepare our kids for life. We had a lot of questions about that, and even though we had researched, just like you might, about the percentage of kids who go to college that are homeschooled and all of those, and you have the facts that sometimes just results speak more than our words. I can remember one of our grandparents. They were amazed that our 2-year-old or 3-year-old came over one day and said, "The Nile is the longest river in the world." And they just couldn't fathom how did she know that? So that's an example of, now that they're adults, all of the grandparents have express to us the decision to homeschool and what a positive impact that had on our family.
And then lastly, sometimes you just have to ignore it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, it's, am I called to do this as you have addressed and we continue to? This is a calling. And if you're called to it, you move forward.
Right. And I find that the people that you want to ignore the most in homeschooling are the ones that you do see out that you're not going to see again, that may make comments about why your kids are at the grocery store in the middle of the day or at the park in the middle of the day. To be kind and be gracious, but just move on. You don't have to change everyone's opinion. All right. So opinions. A lot of people have them, right? When we look for opinions, we're a lot of times, what's the first place that you look?
You got to Google it.
I Google it, right?
Right.
Or I go to Facebook or online forum, Reddit, one of those things, and I try to Google the answer. So who do you find that those places are reliable for most information? What's the first thing you do when you go to when you're looking for a new restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah, you're looking for reviews,
Right.
okay? And so, personally, you look at things a little differently than I do, even. But you have to consider the source of where it is that you're going, okay?
So, if you were going to go look at Google and see like a Google review, how do you approach that? So, you Google the restaurant, and then what? Do you judge it on stars, or how do you judge it?
Well, and it's also what is my expectation ultimately is where it is. I mean, using the restaurant makes it kind of simple, but I mean, if I'm wanting a burger and we're looking at an Italian restaurant, your favorite,
Right.
I know the two aren't going to G and ha really well. Okay.
Well, another one too is if service is important to me and I see the Google reviews, they have good Google reviews, but the service is just okay. Maybe that might not be one that I pick, or that it takes a long time, or it's not kid friendly. And that's why I think it's important to look at our why, go back to that
Absolutely.
thing that we always talk about. We feel like we're just beating a drum about that. But if you know it's important to you, then it's easier to narrow down your choices and to find information that you can trust online.
So I'm not trying to dodge it. Yes, reviews are important, but
Yeah.
it's one component. It is not the overarching that drives or dictates
Right.
it, definitely.
Okay. All right. The next one is online forums, and like specifically, I see a lot of Facebook groups, and people will ask people will ask questions like, what's a curriculum for third grade? And then you'll get hundreds of answers below. Is that information that you would trust?
Personally, no. I would want to have more in depth that personal relationship that you acknowledged before to be able to garner that. I mean, personally, that would be one that me. What about you?
I find I do not generally give curriculum advice to people that I don't know, because I don't know what resources you have, what abilities you have, what time you have, and what effort you want to put in. That's my rating of curriculum. If I get to know you and understand all of those things about you, I will give you some curriculum options. But for the most part, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for your family. My expectations aren't the same. I need to know those before curriculum, before another aspect too is approaches are unique to the family. So so in our homeschool circle, our small group of circle, I was the only one that didn't use a school at home approach at first. As they got older, they used different things. The families we knew used different things, but had I done that sort of crowdsourcing or popularity mentality, I probably would have succumbed to the peer pressure of that, and it wouldn't work well for our family.
Well, and it worked well. I don't know if I can speak to that per se, but it wasn't what was best for our family because of the age of our children, and we wanted the whole family to learn together. And the unit study provided that opportunity for our youngest to be able to learn that the Nile was the longest river, as well as our oldest, who absolutely loved history,
Right.
and they could all come together learning together. That's
Right.
was
And so I guess what I want to encourage you is that just because your friends are using a specific curriculum and it works well for them, or even now are using a co-op, using a particular online resource, look using a particular hybrid thing, you're not alone just because you don't use the same method and the same what that they do. And so crowdsourcing your opinions on that can sometimes be dangerous in that they can veer you in a direction that isn't right for your family.
correct. Absolutely.
Let's see. Oh, another one too is when I see those recommendations for specific curriculum that um that's one mindset. So if you're using a specific, I won't name a specific one, but like a school at home, or if you're using a specific um classical is another one that people do, a specific approach, and you only say I can only use this one curriculum, that a lot of times you'll find a biased opinion. They all have blogs, they all have videos that you can watch. So I find there's other sources of trusted information online than a specific curriculum provider.
Gotcha. So not necessarily a vendor of a particular, but one or a resource that is overarching before
Mhm.
then you drill down to
Right.
the individual subject itself.
Yes. So if I was looking for testing, for example, I'm not going to go to a specific curriculum provider. I'm going to go to either my state support group, or I'm going to the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and going to click through there to the state site, because that general information is not, well, it is. It's general. So it gives you a good overview of what you need to do before you narrow it down to something else.
You know, when that generalization, then you feather that in with what your individual calling is,
Right.
what the needs are, how creative you are, who's going to be doing the instruction,
Right.
what is it that you're looking for then to be able to come together. So
The truth to know is that there is good information out online. I mean, we're online. There's a reason that we're doing these videos online, is because we can help more people by being online.
right,
But in all, what the main thing is, who can you trust?
yes.
If you're not subscribed or following us on social media, let's go ahead and do that. And also hit that like button so that it pushes us up and we get more views on it. Also, if you haven't seen my curriculum reviews or my book reviews that help you as parents get more confidence in teaching your kids, take a look at those. I've just scheduled some monthly webinars over the summer. And if you are interested in some topics that will help you with some very specific things like picking curriculum, figuring out your roles in your homeschooling, and just gaining confidence in all, check out that link down bottom. There's a sign up for that. Thanks for watching.